RTFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
In the orb of the sun there is a seventh portion of light, which is added to it from the moon. By measure it is put in until the seventh portion of the light of the sun is departed. They enter into the western gate, circuit by the north, and through the eastern gate go forth over the face of heaven. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio, and I do appreciate all of the listeners from America and around the world for joining us and supporting our work and joining us in discussion and discourse. We appreciate your fellowship and thank you for just allowing us your audience and your attention. Those of you that are familiar with and follow our shows on a weekly basis, you know that last week and even the week before, Rob Skiba and I did a series of shows where we talked about the release of his book on testing the globe. He has a several volume set coming out where he's going to be sharing books that are supportive of the biblical cosmology, geocentricity, and also we talked about in great detail last week about the book of Enoch and the calendar system, which is revealed in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. Since publishing those two videos on our YouTube channels, Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia, there has been lively discussion and numerous comments left by people that are passionate about the topic in many different ways. There's a lot that follow the Enochian calendar, but their interpretation of it differs from mine in that they only support the Enochian solar calendar, which is a 364-day calendar. And I do also support that and allow the seasons to be dictated by that calendar. And in fact, the calendar that we have put together is based upon what Enoch brings forth with regard to the movement of the sun through the six gates of heaven in chapter 71 of the book of Enoch. And he does describe, and I go into great detail about this, a 364-day solar calendar, 30 days per each of the 12 months of the year, and then you have 2 equinoxes and solstices. But that is only one portion and one aspect of what Enoch reveals with regard to the calendar system and to the movements of the luminaries. And this is what I've been trying to bring forth to people, and to help people to understand better that all of the luminaries, the sun and the moon as the greater and the lesser luminary described in the book of Enoch, chapter 71 and 72, but also the wandering stars, the planets, and the Zodiac. They also have a part to play in what is the universal clockwork system of time encoded into the heavens. And so you can't just pick and take only one aspect of what Enoch is speaking about and what he reveals. If you're going to follow the Enochian calendar, you have to read through the entirety of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries and listen to everything that Enoch is describing. Because, yes, he does describe a 364-day solar calendar, but he also describes a 354-day lunar calendar. And he also describes how these two calendar systems come together, and also they um, how it is that one can determine and mesh them together to make the lunar solar calendar. And so the true Enochian calendar, based on the entirety of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, has to do with the movements of the sun and the moon, and not just the sun. And so I know a lot of people follow the Enochian solar calendar and are very adamant about it being the only calendar that Enoch talks about. And not just Enoch. I also know that in the scriptures, in Revelation and other places like the book of Daniel, that there is a description also of a 360-day seasonal year. And again, I absolutely agree and affirm that Enoch describes a 364-day solar calendar. 360 days, 30 days through each of the six gates of heaven, which span from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer, and then the 4 days where it takes the sun either to cross the equator or to reverse course after reaching its solstice limits. And so I'm going to speak about this again this evening and also talk about the structure of creation, because for a lot of people that understand and know about things like 9/11 and government sponsored terror and the New World Order, and how they lie to us about everything, even with regard to the money system, that the Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank, that they print the money and loan it to the governments at interest, and then the people are forced to pay taxes to just keep down that interest, when again, this Federal Reserve is not an organization that sponsors or supports or attempts to encourage and support the American people in our livelihoods, but in fact, they are really a foreign terrorist organization that um, enslaves the masses and keeps the debt perpetuated in order that they can utilize the interest to support their own interests. And so, um, once you awake to that particular fact, that ever since the Federal Reserve System has been put into place, the New World Order elites, have utilized that money to fund the global wars and to arm and to create controlled opposition in order to drive an agenda to create an established world government. And we see that shortly after the Federal Reserve came into place, that World War I took place, and we see with Albert Pike's vision of needing 3 world wars as pretext to create um, a one world government through what was the League of Nations, and then turned out the United Nations came about after World War II. And this is now the organization that has the reputation and the respect of all the nations of the world who are now joined and part of it, to control the affairs of nations and dictating international law. And they have achieved the vision of Albert Pike's vision, released in 1871. And that shows you how much influence and how much power these individuals have, and how it is that they have, at every turn of the way, destroyed the truth of the Most High's traditions, values, and ways in teaching his people Israel, and we as modern day Christians, about how to adhere to and listen to his law and follow his commandments. And so they have not only distorted and twisted and counterfeited the cosmology, but they've also subjugated, changed the calendar system, and in that way instituted worship of pagan holidays, and have also confounded when Sabbath is celebrated and observed, as well as the Levitical feast days. There's a reason why there's so much confusion going on nowadays, and there's so much, for those of you that are seeking answer on the question of the calendar as well as the cosmology, I think the book of Enoch is the key for understanding all those things. And that when you study it in great depth, as I have, and I don't claim to be any kind of an expert, but I am the one that was led by the Most High to decrypt the entire book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And I wrote my 9th book on that decryption. You can find it and read it for yourself. The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And the reason that I read that quote earlier this evening about how the luminaries move is because it says in the book of Enoch that they enter into the western gate, circuit by the north, and through the eastern gate go forth over the face of heaven. So he's basically describing that the sun and the moon move in a circle above the face of the earth. And so when you understand that this is what Enoch is describing as the motions of the heavenly luminaries, then you apply that to um, understanding what he is describing, and basically what Enoch was shown and what he saw is what we see revealed in the time-lapse photography of the star trails over the course of an evening. And so Enoch's vision, as encoded and placed into the book of the courses of the heavenly luminaries 2,000 years ago, it is confirmed by modern day technology and photography and videography. And we know that even though science and NASA tell us that the luminaries, especially the planets, are moving in circle around the sun, in fact, the luminaries move in circle around Polaris, the North Star. And it is the one star which, remaining fixed and motionless, does not move or waver in any manner. And so I'm going to revisit this again as far as the calendar, touch upon that first, to help those of you that are examining the calendar issue to open your mind to the fullness of what Enoch is talking about. Because again, he's not just describing one calendar system with regard to the sun, but also you have to incorporate the moon and the stars as well as the zodiac, because all of them play into what is the heavenly clockwork system. And the great year, which is the sun moving through the signs of the zodiac, it's a cycle of 25,920 years. That's the larger calendar that is described by the heavens. The shorter calendar is the sun's rotation over the course of the year and the moon's rotation over the course of the year. And then you have the other cycles, which are the planets, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, their revolutions around Polaris as well, which take different segments of time. And these cycles also have influence upon and determine certain aspects of, for instance, Mars is attributed to wars and rumors of wars. Venus is said to influence individuals and collective humanity as far as love. Mercury is connected to wisdom, and Jupiter is connected to abundance and wealth. I forget exactly what Saturn is, but we'll go through some of that as well. And so, because there is so many comments about how, you know, the correct Enoch calendar is only a solar calendar, I thought I would revisit this issue while it's still fresh in people's minds, and then I'll be able to just link this show to all of those comments, and hopefully people listening to it can then understand what I'm talking about. Because I do understand, yes, Enoch speaks about a 364-day solar calendar, but that is not the only calendar he describes. And he spends 14 chapters on the entirety of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, not just on the cycle of the sun, but also he describes in great detail the cycle of the moon, the cycle of the stars, and the cycle of the zodiac. And so we'll look at and examine some of those things. Now, if you want to ask me a question or you want to share a comment, just post it into the chat room near the breaks, and I will revisit the chat rooms over the break, and then I will try to answer and share your commentary with the listening audience. And so I would ask you to follow along with me. Go to the book of Enoch, just open and find, the book of Enoch. And we're going to begin with, and I'm not going to go through all of it, I'm just going to highlight certain aspects of the various chapters. But we start with chapter 71, which in the very first verse it says, "The book of the revolutions of the luminaries of heaven, according to their respective classes, their respective powers, their respective periods, their respective names, the places where they commenced their progress, and their respective months, which Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, explained to me, he who conducted them, the whole account of them, according to every year of the world, forever, until a new work shall be effected, which will be eternal." And so Enoch is telling us that the 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 luminaries and the cycles that he's about to describe are how the calendar system works. Now I want to read one passage really quick from the Targum. and this is about the luminaries when God put them into the expanse of the heavens. He said, and the Lord said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heaven to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them, the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of the months, and the beginning of the years, the passing away of the months, and the passing away of the years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of the seasons. And so God tells us here that both the sun and the moon are for the determining of the days, weeks, months, and years. And so it's not just one. So the calendar is not just based on one, but both. And also the planets and the zodiac, as I will explain it. And so for those of you that are only following a solar calendar, well, you're not incorporating the other aspects of what are the heavenly luminaries and their influence and effect on humanity and their part that they play in the calendar. Because there's a reason why the moon and its quarterly phases are um, are determined by 7-day periods, that each phase equals one 7-day portion, and it's because it has connection to Sabbath, as we will speak about, and as I brought up in the show that I did with Rob. And so, in my opinion, in order to understand and to follow correctly the fullness of the calendar system as established by the Most High God, one must recognize and also keep up with the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, because each one of them have a part to play in determining the calendar. And so we'll look at this. All right, so the from Enoch chapter 71 verse 2, it describes the first law of the luminaries, and it speaks about the great luminary, which is the sun. And as I broke it down and as I explained it in Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, in verse 71, verse 8, Enoch says, the sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north to proceed towards the east is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. So here again, Enoch is telling you about how the great luminary moves, that it sets in the west, moving, across the southern skies from east to west, and then it goes back towards the east by returning towards the north. And that's why we see in the morning it returns to our eastern skies for sunrise, because it's moving in a circle, which, it was this verse and the one that I opened the show with, that you cannot make sense of what Enoch is describing according to the Copernican heliocentric model for understanding the world. And it's only by embracing flat Earth that one can then determine that the Earth is motionless and it is the foundation, the backdrop for the movements of the sun and the moon and all the other luminaries, which are moving in circle above it. And so it was that key that allowed me to decrypt the entirety of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And I explain it in great detail. Every verse and every chapter of the 14 chapters of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries are explained in that book. And little did I know that when I began to decrypt all of these verses, that what God and Enoch would be leading me to understand is the calendar that you have to take into account the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, and the part that they play in determining the universal clockwork system. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. So, second portion. And so, I'm going to be moving through, but I'm going to try to cover this quickly. And so, basically, what Enoch describes in chapter 71 is the sun's motion through the six gates of heaven. And I explain in great detail, and I will explain at the Flat Earth International Conference here in November. My speech is about decrypting the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And so Enoch describes the sun's movement back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. He starts with the sun's um, being above the equator for the vernal equinox, because it is in the spring, in the month of Nisan or Abib, that God's calendar starts. It's not like in the Gregorian that starts in January in the middle of winter. God's true calendar begins in March with the month of Nisan. And it's the waxing crescent moon, which is nearest um, the vernal equinox, which determines the feast days, the festivals. But the seasonal calendar always begins with the vernal equinox. And so, as I said, Enoch describes the sun's movement from the equator to the Tropic of Cancer for the summer solstice, and then the sun reverses course, begins moving back down towards the equator for the autumnal equinox. That begins the season of fall. It arrives to the Tropic of Capricorn for the winter solstice. That begins the season of winter. It takes 3 months to get back to the equator, and that gives us the fullness of a 364-day solar year. 30 days for the sun to move through the six gates, and then 2 equinoxes and 2 solstices. So 364 days. Now, when we get to chapter 72, you have what Enoch describes as the inferior luminary, which is the moon. And here he describes in great detail, just as he did about the 364-day solar calendar, he describes a 354-day lunar calendar. And he tells you that the beginning of the months, which again, the months and the weeks are determined by the movement and the cycle of the moon. The seasons and the days are determined by the sun. But Enoch tells you very specifically, and if you're going to follow the Enochian calendar, well, then you have to listen to what Enoch is saying. And he tells you that when the waxing crescent appears in 1/7 portion, that to you is the beginning of the months. And so, I mean, you can't follow Enochian calendar if you don't allow the moon to determine the months. Because if you are not following a calendar which the moon determines the months, it's not an Enochian calendar. You're only following one aspect of what is the real Enochian calendar. And so I'll share that for you here. It says, every month at its exit and entrance, it becomes changed, and its period are as the periods of the sun. And when in like manner its light is to exist, its light is a seventh portion from the light of the sun. Thus it rises, and at its commencement towards the east goes forth for 30 days. At that time it appears and becomes to you the beginning of the month. 30 days it is with the sun in the gate from which the sun goes forth. Half of it is in extent 7 portions, one half, and the whole of its orb is void of light, except a seventh portion out of the 14 portions of its light. So what Enoch is saying, that basically it takes the moon 15 days to go from being completely void of light to being completely full of light. And for those that know that the cycle, it takes the moon an average of 29.531 days to go through its 4 phases. And so the lunar calendar alternates between 29 and 30-day months. And the beginning of the months are always determined by the waxing crescent moon. Even the word for Kadesh, which means time of the new moon or the beginning of the month, the word Kadesh comes from the word Kadash, the verb, the Hebrew verb Kadash, Chadash, which means to renew, to repair, and to uh, become full. And so that's exactly what the moon is doing when it regathers its light. And when it becomes first visible with 1/7 portion of light, that is the waxing crescent, or what people call the horned crescent moon. And so that is the beginning of the month. And so then Enoch goes into great description of how the moon goes through its phases, that over half, it will take half of the month for it to go from completely dark to being full, and then it will start to lose its light by a seventh portion every day. And so there's a reason why the moon takes an average 29 and a half days to go through its 4 phases. And that reason is because God's calendar, his Enochian lunar-solar calendar, the months and the weeks are determined by the cycles of the moon. The first appearance of the moon, the waxing crescent, gives us the beginning of the month. It's the first day of the lunar month. That day is excluded from the other 4 7-day weekly Sabbaths. And the Sabbaths, as I said, are aligned to the phases of the moon. The first quarter, the full moon, the third quarter, and the lunar conjunctive phase are all aligned to Sabbath. And so every month on the lunar-solar, the true Enochian calendar, you have the Sabbaths aligning with the quarterly phases of the moon. Because again, it is the moon and its appearance that determines the beginning of the month, as Enoch clearly tells you here. And so here he's describing the lunar calendar, which is a portion of what is the giant clockwork calendar that is encoded into the motions of the heavenly luminaries. And so you can't just follow the 364-day solar calendar. You have to incorporate the moon, the planets, and the zodiac into what is the larger calendar that God put into the heavens for determining and marking the passing of time. And he also tells you in later portion, I think it's in chapter 77, Enoch describes how the two calendars come together, and that you have to not only incorporate the sun and the moon, but also the planets and also the zodiac into what is, again, the larger calendar system of what is written into the stars, or what the Bible calls the Maseroth. And so in chapter 73, Enoch tells you how the sun and the moon work together and moving through the six gates of heaven, that they create what is the two calendars coming together to create the lunar-solar calendar. And so he says this in 73 verse 10. Thus I beheld their stations as according to the fixed order of the months. The sun rises and sets. At those times there is an excess of 30 days belonging to the sun in 5 years. All the days belonging to each year of the 5 years, when completed, amount to 364 days. And to the sun and the stars belong 6 days in each of the 5 years, thus 30 days belonging to them. And so what Enoch is describing here is that the lunar calendar is 10 days short of what is the solar calendar, and the movement of the sun and the stars, because the sun and the stars move on a seasonal, a 360-day calendar, which, again, if you take that the lunar calendar is 354 days, subtract that from the 360, you get 6 days, which is what it says here. And the stars belong 6 days. 6 days in each of the 5 years, thus 30 days belonging to them. So that's what Enoch is talking about. So he's telling you how the two calendars come together. The lunar and the solar calendar come together, and how one has to, in how one determines the alignment of each with the other. And so again, it's not just one aspect, the solar calendar, but you have to incorporate both. And if you're truly following an Enochian calendar, well, then you got to listen to everything that Enoch says about the movements and the motions of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, because he describes all of them. And so you have to incorporate all of them into the grander, larger, again, the clockwork system of the universe. So continuing. So that the moon has 30 days less than the sun and the stars. The moon brings on all the years exactly, that their stations may come neither too forwards nor too backwards a single day, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. In 3 years, the days are 1,092. In 5 years, they are 1,820. In 8 years, 2,912 days. Here, Enoch is again describing the solar year, which is 364 days. To the moon alone belong in 3 years 1,062 days. In 5 years, 50 days less than that of the sun. Because again, I told you, the lunar calendar is 10 days short of the solar calendar. And so Enoch is telling you here that In 5 years, it will be 50 days less. For an addition being made to the 1,062 days, in 5 years there are 1,770 days, and the days of the moon in 8 years are 2,832 days. So you just basically multiply, the 5 times 354, the 8 times 354, and you get the numbers that are being spoken of there uh, this these verses. For its days in 8 years are less than those of the sun by 80 days. Again, the lunar calendar is 10 days short. And so he's telling you how to um, determine how the lunar and the solar calendar, not just one, but both together. Okay, which 80 days are its diminution in 8 years. The year then becomes truly complete according to the station of the moon and the station of the sun, which rise in the different gates, which rise and set in them for 30 days. So here again, Enoch is telling you that the year is determined by the movements of both the sun and the moon, not just one or the other. And so for those that are wanting to truly follow the Enochian calendar, you don't follow just the solar year and the sun or the moon and the lunar year, but you have to follow both in order and understand how they come together. Because as I said, because the moon is 10 days short every year of what is the 364 day of the solar calendar, you have, after 3 years, the lunar calendar being 30 days short of the solar calendar. In order to intercalculate them together again, you just add a 13th month to the lunar calendar and then they link back together. It's that simple. And so the lunar solar calendar is the one that I follow. All right, but continuing. And then in Enoch chapter 74, you have Enoch describing the movements of the zodiac and how this also creates another aspect of the calendar system. And that is the zodiac. The sun moves through the zodiac once every month, but also it will cycle through the zodiac 1 degree every year, and it will take it takes 72 years to go through 1 degree. And being that the zodiac is 360 degrees, you just multiply that times 72, and it takes 25,920 years for the sun to cycle through the 12 houses of the zodiac. And so I'll read that in chapter 74. These are the leaders of the chiefs of the thousands, those which preside over all creation and over all the stars, with the 4 days which are added and never separated from the place allotted them, according to the complete calculation of the year. And these serve 4 days which are not calculated in the calculation of the year. He's talking about the um, the solstices and the equinoxes. And so for the solar year, as other people have already stated and commented, the solar calendar is a 360-day calendar because it takes the sun 30 days to move through each of the 6 gates of heaven. But then you add the equinoxes and the solstices, and that gives you the 364 days. Respecting them, men greatly err, for these luminaries truly serve in the dwelling place of the world. 1 day in the first gate, one day in the third gate, one in the fourth gate, and one in the sixth gate. As I explain in my book, Enoch is talking about the solstices and the equinoxes, because when the these 4 days that he's talking about, the one that occurs in the first gate is the winter solstice. The one that occurs in the third gate is the vernal equinox. The one that occurs in the fourth gate is the autumnal equinox. And the one that occurs in the sixth gate is the summer solstice. And again, I explain this in great detail in my book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And I'm just going over it quickly here so that I can get all this information into one show and help people to understand that if you truly want to follow the Enochian calendar, you don't just follow what are the movements of the sun, but you have to incorporate the moon, the planets, and the stars, the movement of the zodiac. Continuing. And the harmony of the world becomes complete every 364th state of it. For the signs, the seasons, the years, and the days, Uriel showed me, the angel whom the Lord of glory appointed over all the luminaries of heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth, become conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven. And so again, Enoch is telling you here that the calendar and the fullness of it are determined by the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which are the constellations which make up the zodiac. And so it's not one or the other, but it's all of them together, which is what I've been trying to explain to people. But yet, all the people that are so adamant that they have already figured out and that the Enochian calendar is a 364-day solar calendar. That's true, but that's only one aspect of it. If you truly want to follow the real Enochian calendar, you have to incorporate the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars. As Enoch said at the very beginning of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, and in the middle and at the end. All right, so continuing here. Now, Enoch in chapter 75, he goes over how the winds move, and I explained that as well, because you have to understand that what he is describing as the winds is also plotted on the calendar. I mean, on the motions and their locations are determined when you're looking down on the face of the earth, and the earth is the backdrop for the description of those motions. And again, I explained this whole chapter and these winds, their location, their motions, all of that as well in that particular part of my book. All right. And so now Enoch goes through in chapter 77, he revisits and explains again how the moon, the sun, and the moon and the other luminaries come together to form what is the calendar, the great calendar, the Enochian calendar. And he tells you about um, the moon and what determines the beginning of the months, and how it cycles through its lights to give us the again the fullness of the cycle of the month, because Enoch describes that, again, the moon moves from being completely void of light to being completely full of light in 1/7 portion daily. And so he also describes that it is over 7 days that it becomes 1/4 full, and then another 7 days that it becomes completely full, and then another 7 days that it becomes, third quarter moon, and then in another 7 days it becomes um, completely void of light, a lunar conjunctive moon. Which, in my opinion, the reason he's describing that is because he's given us and telling us how it is the moon which determines the Sabbaths. And it's the moon moving through these cycles that give us what we see as the phases, the quarterly phases, which are 7-day cycles. All right, we'll be right back for second hour. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. It's crazy how fast the show goes by when you're, really caught up in trying to share a topic and bring it to light so that everybody can understand it in clarity. Which Shelly in the Discord chat, she says that, "Hi Zen and everyone, I'm so glad you are spending a lot of time detailing this subject. It is really helping me understand better since I have been really struggling with keeping the true Sabbath." And so I really appreciate you saying that, Shelley. And I really appreciate all of you that are opening yourself to the study of the calendar issue, because I do believe it to be very critical, and that we are commanded in the 10 commandments to not bow down to any idols or take any other gods before the most high God, and to also to honor his Sabbath. And how can you even know what that Sabbath is if you don't even know what calendar to follow and how he set it up? Well, you can know, because Enoch gives us in great detail exactly what the motions of the luminaries are and how to determine and to follow them according to the calendar that the Most High set up and put into the heavens. And that's the calendar we should all be abiding by, is what is in our skies and what we daily witness and see with our own eyes, and not what someone randomly decided or wrote down, thousands of years ago, or determined, whether it's some emperor or some Caesar or some pope, that just because they were given authority during those times, we shouldn't allow them to determine what that calendar is for us. But we should study, and studying to show ourselves approved, determine what God has placed into the creation for determining the correct way that we are to honor and observe his feast days and also his Sabbaths. And because so many people are having difficulty uh, determining when the beginning of the months are, I decided that we're going to start a Discord group just for the celebrations of Kadesh. And when you know when Kadesh occurs, you know when the following then 4 7-day Sabbaths actually occur. And so this will be a great way for all of us to come together and for us to determine together when we see the waxing crescent, no matter where we are in whichever part of the world, and it will be different for everybody, which is why I tell everybody that if you are following our Enochian seasonal lunar solar calendar, that you have to, uh, even though we break it down in great clarity for you, you have to determine when the appearance of the waxing crescent is for wherever you are in the world. And then you can align or realign our calendar so that you could be correct in maintaining the Sabbaths according to the quarterly phases of the moon, which again, there's a reason why the moon cycles through its phases in 7-day segments. And that's to show us when to honor the Sabbaths. That again, it occurs on the first quarter, the full moon, the third quarter, and the lunar conjunctive moon. That the ancient Hebrews, the Israelites in the ancient times, back when there was no calendar written down, they just watched it. They saw it in the stars. They saw it in the heavens every night. And it was easy for them to follow and determine. And they could tell just by looking at the moon, because they were so familiar with it, what cycle it was in, according to its 1/7 portion, as Enoch describes and as he determines and as he relates in this book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which we'll go back into. So let's go back into it. All right, we are now at Enoch Chapter 77. The names of the sun are these: one Ariaris, the other Tomas. The moon has 4 names. The first is Asonia, the second Ebla, the third Benes, and the fourth Ere. I think those are connected to its quarterly phases as well. These are the 2 great luminaries whose orbs are as the orbs of heaven, and the dimensions of both are equal. So here Enoch tells us that the moon and the sun are of equal size, even though the sun is 7 times brighter than that of the moon. In the orb of the sun, there is a 7th portion of light which is added to it from the moon. By measure, it is put in until the 7th portion of light of the sun is departed. They enter into the western gate, circuit by the north, and through the eastern gate go forth over the face of heaven. When the moon rises, it appears in heaven, and the half of a 7th portion of light is all which is in it. In 14 days, the whole of its light is completed. So here, Enoch is telling you again that when the moon rises and it's lit by 1/7 portion, that is the beginning of the month. And he's about to tell you, all the phases. Again, in 14 days, the whole of its light is completed. By 3 quintuples, light is put into it, until in 15 days its light is completed. According to the signs of the year, it has 3 quintuples. The moon has the half of a 7th portion. During its diminution, on the first day its light decreases a 14th part. On the second day, it decreases a 13th part. On the third day, a 12th part. On the fourth day, as 11th part. On the fifth day, a 10th part. On the sixth day, a 9th part. On the seventh day, an 8th part. On the 8th day, it decreases a 7th part. On the 9th day, it decreases a 6th part. On the 10th day, it decreases a 5th part. On the 11th day, it decreases the 4th part. On the 12th day, it decreases a 3rd part. On the 13th day, it decreases a 2nd part. On the 14th day, it decreases a half of its 7th part. And on the 15th day, the whole remainder of its light is consumed. And so, here Enoch is telling you of how it goes through. All right, this is also here where he tells you how you follow the lunar portion of his calendar. On stated months, the moon has 29 days. It also has a period of 28 days. Now, that's not including the first day. So if you add the first day, it gives you a period of 30 and 29 days. So the lunar calendar alternates between 29 and 30-day uh, portions. And so, again, this is a part of the calendar that you have to also incorporate into the Enochian calendar. And he tells you that the months have 29 and 28 days here, but that's excluding the Kadesh. And so Enoch tells you that the months are 29 and 30 days. And so those that are only following the solar calendar, which every month is 30 days, well, how do you jive it with what Enoch is telling you here? That the months alternate between 29 and 28 days. That doesn't follow in line with the solar calendar. And so this is another aspect of the lunar part of the calendar that you have to incorporate into the Enochian calendar. Continuing. Uriel likewise showed me another regulation when light is poured into the moon, how it is poured into it from the sun. All the time that the moon is in progress with its light, it is poured into it in the presence of the sun until its light is in 14 days completed in heaven. And when it is wholly extinguished, its light is consumed in heaven, and on the first day it is called the new moon, for on that day light is received in it. See, this is Kadesh, the new moon. It is when light first appears in it. That is the beginning of the month. And so it's very clear. And Enoch described this in chapter 72 as well. He tells you that when the moon becomes 1/7 portion full, that is the beginning of the months. And so here Enoch is relaying and reiterating and telling you again that the months are 29 and 30 days alternatively. And when it is wholly extinguished, as light is consumed in heaven, on the first day it is called the new moon. For on that day light is received into it. It becomes precisely completed on the day that the sun descends into the west while the moon ascends at night from the east. So he's telling you when the moon is full, that when the sun goes down in the western skies, that the moon will rise full in the eastern skies. And that's exactly what happens, that the sun will be completely opposite of the moon when it is in full phase. And again, it is on that day that we celebrate the second Sabbath. The moon then shines all the night until the sun rises before it, when the moon disappears in turn before the sun. Where light comes to the moon, there again it decreases until all its light is extinguished, and the days of the moon pass away. And then its orb remains solitary and without light. So Enoch is telling you when it is in its lunar conjunctive phase, which is when we celebrate the fourth Sabbath. And it is during this phase that we are not able to see it because it is moving with the sun. The moon rises with the sun, crosses the skies with the sun, and sets with the sun, which is why we never see it. During 3 months, it affects in 30 days each month its period, and during 3 more months, it affects it in 29 days each. there are the times in which it affects its decrease in its first period and in the first gate, namely in 177 days. And so Enoch is telling you here that in half a year, you have 177 days, and that's alternating with 29 and 30-day months, which again, a full lunar year is 354 days, which is 10 days short of the solar calendar, which is 364 days. So continuing. And at the time of its going forth, during 3 months, it appears 30 days each, and during 3 more months, it appears 29 days each. So, Enoch describes where it's going forth through the 6 gates of heaven from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer, and then when it returns from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. And so those two portions give you 177 days, which is alternating 29 and 30-day periods, which again, the months, as Enoch describes them, begin when the moon appears as a waxing crescent. And so he very clearly tells you that each month, according to the calendar, the lunar and solar calendar, that the months begin when the moon makes its first appearance. In the night, it appears for each 20 days as the face of a man, in the day as heaven, for it is nothing else except its light. And then, chapter 78, Enoch tells you, after he has just gone through the lunar portion of the calendar again, he says, "And now, my son Methuselah, I have shown you everything, and the account of every ordinance of the stars of heaven is finished. He showed me every ordinance respecting these, which take place at all times, and in all seasons, under every influence, in all years, at the arrival and under the rule of each, during every month and every week. He showed me also the decrease of the moon, which is affected in the 6th gate, for in that 6th gate is its light consumed. From this is the beginning of the month, and its decrease is affected in the 6th gate in its period until 177 days are completed, according to the mode of calculation by weeks, 25 weeks and 2 days. Its period is less than that of the sun, according to the ordinance of the stars, by 5 days in 1/2 year precisely." Which again is exactly what I told you, that the sun, the moon is 177 days over over a period of 6 months, and the sun is 182 days, which is 5 days short. And so, you add the 182 days times 2, and you get 364. And so the lunar calendar is 5 days every 6 months, which is exactly what Enoch says here, shorter than the solar calendar. Enoch 78, verse 5. When that their visible situation is completed, such is the appearance and likeness of every luminary which Uriel, the great angel who conducts them, showed to me. Chapter 79. In those days Uriel answered and said to me, "Behold, I have showed you all things, O Enoch, and all things have I revealed to you. You see the sun, the moon, and those which conduct the stars of heaven, which cause all their operations, seasons, and arrivals to return." In the days of sinners, the years shall be shortened. Their seed shall be backward in their prolific soil, and everything done on earth shall be subverted and disappear in its season. The rain shall be restrained, and heaven shall stand still. In those days, the fruits of the earth shall be late and not flourish in their seasons, and in their seasons, the fruits of the trees shall be withholden. The moon shall change its laws and not be seen at its proper period. But in those days shall heaven be seen, and barrenness shall take place in the borders of the great chariots in the west. Heaven shall shine more than when illuminated by the orders of light, while many chiefs among the stars of authority shall err, perverting their ways and works. Those shall not appear in their season who commanded them, and all the classes of the stars shall be shut up against sinners. The thoughts of those who dwell on earth shall transgress within them, and they shall be perverted in all their ways. They shall transgress and think themselves gods, while evil shall be multiplied among them, and punishment shall come upon them, so that all of them shall be destroyed. All right, so basically that's he tells in these latter chapters about what it will be like at the end of days, and that as in the book of Revelation, it says that the stars shall come crashing down to the earth, and those are the luminaries. The luminaries are angels, and so there will be a class of angels that come down to the earth, and it's my opinion that these angels will have part in the wrath of God that is poured out on the wicked and those not written into the books of life, and that they will be given power to destroy 2/3 of humanity that is alive in those times. And so I'll read this last portion and then we'll end, and then I'll check for questions and we'll finish up this show with a look at the structure of the earth. So in chapter 80, Enoch says, he said, O Enoch, look on the book which heaven has gradually dropped down, and reading that which is written in it, understand every part of it. Then I looked on all which was written and understood all, reading the book and everything written in it, the works of man, and of all the children of flesh upon earth during the generations of the world. Immediately after I blessed the Lord, the King of glory, who has thus forever formed the whole workmanship of the world. And I glorified the Lord on account of his long suffering and blessing towards the children of the world. At that time I said, blessed is the man who shall die righteous and good, against whom no catalogue of crime has been written, and with whom iniquity is not found. Then those three holy ones caused me to approach and place me on the earth before the door of my house. And they said unto me, explain everything to Methuselah your son, and inform all your children that no flesh shall be justified before the Lord, for he is their creator. During 1 year we shall leave you with your children until you shall again recover your strength, that you may instruct your family. Write these things and explain them to all your children. But in another year they shall take you from the midst of them, and your heart shall be strengthened, for the elect shall point out righteousness to the elect. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, congratulating each other, but the sinners with sinners shall die. And the perverted with the perverted shall be drowned. Those likewise who act righteously shall die on account of the works of man, and shall be gathered together on account of the works of the wicked. In those days they finished conversing with me, and I returned to my fellow men, blessing the Lord of worlds. And so the next chapter, Enoch is just telling his son Methuselah to write these things down, to preserve them, um, and how he explains, I have given you everything. You're going to pass on these books to your own children and them to their own posterities, and on and on and on. And he talks about, that also at the end of days. Well, I'll read this portion. Enoch says, "Blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all who walk in righteousness, in whom no crime is found, as in sinners when all their days are numbered. With respect to the progress of the sun in heaven, it enters and goes out of each gate for 30 days with the leaders of the 1,000 classes of the stars, with 4 which are added and appertain to the 4 quarters of the year, which conduct them and accompany them at 4 periods. These are the solstices and the equinoxes. Respecting these, men greatly err and do not calculate them in the calculation of every age. For they greatly err respecting them, nor do men know accurately that they are in the calculation of the year. But indeed, these are marked down forever, one in the first gate, one in the third, one in the fourth, and one in the sixth." Ah, goodness. All right, we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final portion. I want to share a comment that Yuta Kahimi placed in the chat room, and whether she or he says that Zen's teachings have been instrumental in my awakening, as have Rob Skiba's. I just want to thank those of you that even open yourselves to the possibilities of our work, and especially mine, because as many of you know, I am highly criticized and largely condemned, and I'm basically blacklisted by most mainstream Christians, even in the flat earth community, that there's a lot of people that will not associate with me, won't even respond to my emails, and for whatever reason they just choose to ignore me, and to basically treat me like the black sheep of the family, which it doesn't bother me anymore. There was a time when I first began when those kind of things used to bug me a little bit, but I've received such condemnation and such hate over the course of my broadcasting career that I'm used to it now. I mean, I basically expect it. And I'm grateful and very appreciative to individuals like Rob Skiba and Robbie Davidson that keep an open mindedness to, even though what I teach and what I say is mostly contrary to what is taught in mainstream churches and on the seminaries and what most people are used to. If you can at least keep an open mind, and in listening to what I say, go and study it for yourself, because all I'm doing is reporting what the ancient manuscripts themselves say. Everything that I declare as truth, I confirm with multiple witnesses from multiple ancient manuscripts. And what you will find with regard to most people's belief systems and what they consider to be truth, or what they build as their foundation of truth, is that really it's based upon a very small segment of what is available to us as the library of truth and wisdom. And most people, just to put it in metaphorical expression, that most people, when they go to the library that is the world or the internet, they will only check out one book over and over and over. And everything they know is based upon that one book. And they say that God only wrote this one book, or inspired this one book. But in my opinion, that's not true, because there have been many books and texts and ancient manuscripts which have been written by the prophets and the apostles themselves and the patriarchs, which are not included in the Bible, but that are the same people that we look to for inspiration in the authorized text. So you know what makes this one text okay and that the others that they write not? It doesn't make sense to me. And so, in my opinion, when you study the fullness of what is available that has been written and inspired by the prophets, the patriarchs, and the apostles, that things come out which are not taught and not embraced by mainstream churchianity. And that's just the way it is. And so, if you want to really, in my opinion, if you want to know more about the truth that is written into the Bible and into the authorized text, that one must study some of what is available from other ancient sources. And it's only by reading them first that one can even bring judgment upon them, in my own opinion. And that most people will just simply condemn everything else and won't read it, and will condemn and judge those that do, and then say that, this is truth and this is the only way to understand it, when they haven't even read all of what is available to then put together the puzzle of truth and to make sense of the underlying truth, which, in my opinion, connects all things. That once you have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and a mind to understand, which comes from studying the ancient manuscripts, that God and the Holy Spirit will reveal themselves through the gospel and through these ancient sources, so that you can then have a discerning mind to then really understand what is true and what isn't. But 99% of mainstream churchianity and the sheeple, um, that look to somebody for interpretation on how to understand the Bible, they don't even read the Bible for themselves, much less these other texts. And so, how are they really supposed to understand truth? They don't, in my opinion. And so, again, I appreciate those of you that are seeking for self, that are studying and reading as much as you can of what is available, because we should consider ourselves blessed to have access so easily from the safe comfort of our own homes to be able to access all this knowledge and to just keyword search a particular manuscript and pull it up in electronic form right there on our computers. I mean, what a magnificent blessing that is. What a gift that is. The powers that be, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, the wickedness in high places that are aligned against humanity, the children of Adam, and which are trying to keep you in ignorance and keep you in darkness and keep you believing in a reality that is foisted and built upon lies. There's a reason why you should study as much as you can in order to free your mind and to free your soul and your spirit from the matrix of control, the matrix of illusion and delusion. Because it's this illusion and delusion that is keeping most people astray and separate from the Most High God and direct relationship with their Savior Messiah and the Holy Spirit. And I realize that this world is such that most people have no consideration, no interest, and place no importance upon their eternity. And because of that, they care not who God is or what the gospel says or why Christ had to come into the flesh in order to redeem us from the fall. They don't care about any of these things. And so the truth of the matter is that most are lost and will remain lost. And they will not be counted in the salvation that is for the elect, and the elect, which is but a few. But you can be numbered amongst the elect. You can be worthy. Christ offered salvation to all of us. Many are chosen, but few heed the call. He said, I will call you one from 1,000, two from 10,000. And I know some of my friends tell me that, that's harsh, that I'm taking hope away from you. No, I'm just trying to bring you the realities of what Christ himself told us of who would truly be numbered amongst the elect and who truly would be worthy. Because remember, it says also in Matthew chapter 25, I think it is, away from me, you workers of iniquity, I know you not. And so you don't want to be one of them. You don't want your Savior Messiah to reject you because you didn't have an interest in and you didn't listen to the words or even study the books and the ancient manuscripts and the prophecies that were passed down through the prophets, the patriarchs, and the apostles as legacy, as heritage for us, for each one of us. And in my opinion, that coming to remembrance is truly the work of who we are, why we are here, and what this world really is all about. That nothing else matters and everything else is meaningless and nonsensical. And so, to those of you that really hear what I say and can resonate with what I'm trying to bring to light for you, I'm trying to wipe away the cobwebs of delusion which are cluttering your mind, which are filling you with false pretenses and false conception and involvement in idolatry without you being a willing participant, because you have no idea right now that you're supporting and have been indoctrinated into a false cosmology, a false calendar system. Uh, and because of that, you are deceived with regard to the Sabbaths, the festivals, the feast days, the holy days. And again, in my opinion, it is very few that know the truth. And even those of you that think, oh, well, I'm following the Enochian calendar, the 364-day solar calendar. Read the fullness of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. Enoch tells you that it is all of the movements and the motions, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the zodiac together, which determine the calendar. And so if you're not adhering to and observing and understanding the movement of all of them together in conjunction, then in my opinion, you're not truly following the Enochian calendar. You're following a segment, a portion of it. And yes, I do know that the Dead Sea Scrolls also supports the observance of the solar calendar. But you have to understand that the Essenes and those that were living in Qumran, they were observing the solar calendar and keeping tabs with it in order to determine when the Levitical priesthood should be changed. And that was a great portion of what they left in writing about their observance of the calendar, is to determine the correct month and the cycle for changing the Levitical priesthood. But even they look to the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees for understanding on the fullness of the calendar. And the fullness of the calendar, as I said, includes all the movements and all the motions of the luminaries, including the moon as a major portion of it. Because as I said, and as I will keep reiterating to you till you get it, the sun determines the days and the seasons. The moon determines the months and the weeks and the Sabbaths and when the Levitical feast days are to be observed. Because the 15th of Nisan is always a full moon Sabbath. The 15th of Tishri for the Feast of Tabernacles is always a full moon Sabbath. And it's only when you're following the lunar-solar calendar that you can truly determine when the Sabbath and the Levitical feast days truly occur. And so, even in, I read it from the book of the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, that in chapter 43, which let me open it and then I'll end with this particular quote, that it tells you that the moon is what determines the feast times, the festival times. And so if you're not observing it in such manner, you're not really determining truly when those Moedim, those appointed times, are. Because as I said, it's clear in the Bible and especially in Exodus in Leviticus 23 that the 15th of when unleavened bread is celebrated, the 15th of Nisan, and also the 15th of Tishri are always a full moon. One other thing as well too, that in Isaiah chapter 66 verse 23, it tells us about at the end of days. And it says, and it shall be from new moon to new moon, which is Kadesh to Kadesh, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all mankind will come to bow down before me, says the Lord. So he tells us at the millennial reign and at the end of days, once the harvest has ensued, that we will be celebrating the new moon convocation, honoring Kadesh as he shows us, as Enoch shows us, and that we will be determining Sabbath according to the Kadesh. And so, you know, it is very clear, in my opinion, when you look at all these different sources, that this is what Enoch reveals and what God reveals. And so in chapter 43 of the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, which is part of the Apocrypha, which was included in the original 80 book canon of the King James, it is the moon that marks the changing seasons, governing the times, their everlasting sign. From the moon comes the sign for the festal days, a light that wanes when it completes its course. The new moon, as its name suggests, renews itself. How marvelous it is in this change! A beacon to the hosts on high, shining in the vault of heavens. And so, again, we see that it is the moon which marks the festival times and also the beginning of the months. And then the beginning of the months determines one other quote I'd like to share with you. And it's from a text called Ezekiel the Tragedian. It says this month shall be the first month of your year, in which I'll lead you to another land which to the Hebrews' fathers I did swear, and say to all the peoples, in this month, on full moon's eve, the paschal sacrifice to God present, and touch the doors with blood, which sign the fearsome angel shall pass by. So here in this, God is telling them that the Passover always occurs on the eve of the full moon. And so, I mean, you can't deny that the full moon is associated to unleavened bread as well as the Feast of Tabernacles. And it's only when you're following the lunar calendar and aligning your Sabbaths to the Kadesh, the waxing crescent, that every 8th, 15th, 22nd, and the 29th of the month are Sabbaths. And so let that sink in. And I will do another show next week where I share, literally, I'm going to share over 30 testimonies from various ancient sources, which also confirm the things that I'm telling you here. But I wanted to spend this show just on the book of Enoch, since most people look to the book of Enoch as authority for understanding about the fallen angels, about the giants, about the fall of the watchers, about how they introduced knowledge, the mysteries of the heavens, and led astray humanity. And as I have shown, one can also look to the book of Enoch for understanding on the way that the earth is oriented, that it's motionless and fixed, and that the luminaries move in circle above it. And you can also trust it for determining the calendar and for observing Sabbath and the feast days. And so, and again, you can't just take one portion or one aspect of the book of Enoch and say, oh, I'm going to follow this and not follow the rest of it. You got to look at it, examine it, and study it in full and see what it says over the entirety of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And only then can you come to decision as to what Enoch is describing as the true. All right. I know I won't have enough time to share anything else, but I appreciate all of you and I thank you again. Remember um, to prove all things and to study to show yourself approved, that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of kings to seek it out. And so I do pray that you will open yourself to the possibilities of those things that I'm saying. I don't ask you to believe me or to trust me, but to study it for yourself and come to discernment on your own. Ask, pray about it. Ask the Most High God to lead you in guidance and discernment. Ask the Holy Spirit to show you in truth whether what I say is biblical or not. All right. God bless all.